So another fairly short one. We're going to go through removing the drums. I've covered this in another video, but there's no harm in doing it again. Then inspection of the inner surface and of the brake shoe assembly. So first of all, off with the split pin. Then off with the hub nut. On with the 5-point puller. Do not try to take a brake drum off with a 3-point puller or a leg puller. Always use the correct tool, otherwise you will damage the drum. And we put the wheel nuts on with the flat against the flat of the puller. Our first task before removing the hub is to slacken off the entire handbrake mechanism. The simplest means to do this is pop out the pin, off with the washer, and disconnect the rod and let it just hang down like that. Now we can go and remove the hub. Before we try pulling this off, we've already got the handbrake slackened off. We'll just slacken off the foot brake adjustment. Two quite nice tools, both of them Sykes Pickavant. This one is just a square slot spanner. That's quite nice if they're a bit worn. If they're in very good condition, the adjusters, then this one is the nicer tool, which is a bi-square drive, but if your adjusters are slightly worn, then these will tend to slip. So we're just going to knock them off 5 flats. There it is. On it goes, and we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When removing the hub, don't mess about, 4-pound lump hammer and give it large. There it goes. So our first task is to check the diameter of the drum. 229mm is the maximum I would suggest to you. So we drop our gauge in and it's getting a bit close, but no, we're fine for today. I think probably in a year's time these want to be replaced. It's just getting a bit close there. Okay, so we're happy with the drum. Now we inspect the brake shoes. Inspect the brake linings. They're both evenly worn. There's no ovality there. And we just have a quick look at the depth. And we have 4mm, over 4mm of lining depth there. I'm happy with those. Now we check that the last person who assembled this did it correctly. You see, there's a leading gap here. That's the way the wheel rotates because we're on the right-hand side of the car. There is the gap at the leading edge. Equally, here is the gap at the leading edge. That is as it should be. It is correct. And finally, we look at this spring here, which has a wire end and then the spring. And that should have the spring pointing forwards with the wire pointing aft. The wire is there so that when you use the handbrake, it doesn't foul on a spring. It's got clearance to move. That's why that is. So, all this looks lovely. We just have a quick look in here and there's no evidence inside of the dust seal of any oil coming out from the inner oil seal. So this entire hub area looks very nice indeed. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that the Girling brake adjuster looks unusual. This is our uprated motorsport spec unit. It's a much more robust unit, and behind it we've mounted a reinforcing plate to try and prevent the cracks that occur otherwise from appearing in the back plate. Now I'm just going to put a little squirt of grease in the mechanism there, and then we can go to the other side and check the left-hand wheel entirely. Whilst you're here, just grab the half shaft. You should be able to just feel a little tick there, and that will show you that your end float on your half shafts has been correctly shimmed behind this back plate. If there's significant end float, then you've got to take this back plate off and redo the shimming. We're fine. Now I'm going to go and do the other side of the car. Do not be tempted to put your drum on at this point, because I bet you your bottom dollar, if you put the drum back on here, you'll go to the other side of the car and find there's something wrong with the brake shoes, and you'll have to replace all four, so you've got to come and take this one off again. So leave this off to the last minute, go and check through the other side, then put the drums back on. Okay. So putting the drum and hub back on the half shaft is something we get asked about quite a lot. So let's just go through this in detail. As your Woodruff key, just quickly clean out the middle channel and lightly clean up the half shaft taper with your favourite bit of Scotch pad. Now you don't want to do anything like emery on that. It wants to be a nice polished surface. So Scotch pad is ideal for this. There we go, so that's a clean surface. Now, all the manuals are very clear about tapered mating surfaces. They should always be absolutely dry. Now, obviously on a rally car, where we're taking the rear hub off several times every year, they never tend to freeze the hub onto the half shaft. But anyone who's tried restoring one of our cars will know that sometimes these can be the very devil to get off because there's been some corrosion built up between them. However, you own the car, so make sure you take it off every year. So I stick by with exactly what the workshop manuals say. These surfaces should be absolutely dry. And the reason for this is that because they are two surfaces mating in parallel, that if you try putting any sort of substance on here, the pressure will be intensely high when you put on the nut, and the grease or oil will be compressed but still present there. Over time, that grease or oil will then work its way out to either end, the pressure will reduce on the taper, and you could well end up with a loose hub on the taper shaft. So that's why you keep them dry. Okay, enough of the school text stuff. Let's actually practically put this together. Now when you put the Woodruff key in, there is a tapered end, and that should match the tapering surface in the half shaft milling. So the taper here, there's the taper. It points towards the diff and is facing in towards the half shaft. Taper, half shaft. In the next step, what we must avoid is when the hub goes on, of dragging this Woodruff key up into the centre there. It then rides up the milling like so, giving a lift here. Then when you put the hub on, it then breaks this point on the hub itself. So one of the ways to try and avoid that is place the Woodruff key with about 5 or 10 mil overhanging the end of the half shaft, like so. Put a very light smear of general purpose grease on the hub outer like so. This then makes a nice surface with the dust seal here. Okay, offer it up carefully. And there's our Woodruff key. Pop that down. And then using a drift, tap it till it's almost flush. On with the washer. On with the nut. Just spin it up neatly. We'll do the final torque later. And now we'll just adjust the brakes. So we wind on the adjuster until we can no longer turn the drum by hand. You'll feel the flats as you go through there. You can hear that slotting across there. If you can't feel the flats, it's usually because your adjuster is too worn and you should just replace it. There we go, that's it. So now back it off three flats. 1, 2, 3. There we go. And then we nip underneath and hook up the handbrake again. Okay, so whilst you're here, just check that both cables run cleanly. If they don't run cleanly, if they're sticking, then you need to replace both cables at once. These are fine. So we get hold of it, we go forward, and onto there. Fit the washer, and we pop the pin in. There we go. So that's the handbrake all hooked up with, notice, its return spring also. Okay, let's go and finish off. What we're looking for is 5 or 6 clicks till the handbrake is fully on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. If this is loose, then go back underneath to where we were a moment ago and tighten up using your 1/2 inch spanner the whole linkage until you get 5 or 6 clicks here. The looser you have this, the more soggy your brakes will feel when you first apply them. So this is a critical task. Get it right. There we go. Now, having put the handbrake on, we now just go back to here to check that this isn't too tight. So, one, tighten it up, 1, that's 2, 3, there we go. That was perfect. So we back it off 3 from there, from locking, 1, 2, 3. Then we put the road wheel back on. lock off that road wheel by raising. There we go. Tighten up the wheel nuts. And now tighten up the half shaft nut. Okay, so I'm using a reasonable weight there, but not with the strength of 10 men. Now I come back and check to see where the hole is. It's just appearing there, so I'm going to sort of tighten it up just a touch more so I can get slip pin in. A bit too far. That's it. You checked all your rear brakes, adjusted them, adjusted the handbrake. Everything should feel very taut now when you go out on the road. Okay, so at the rear of the Amazon, we went through taking the road wheel off, taking the drum off, which is always a bit of entertainment in a car that hasn't been done for a while. We then checked that the inside diameter of the brake drum was less than 229 mil. And once again, much like the fronts, when you go over that 229, the brake performance drops off dramatically. The drum just cannot absorb the heat, so the heat stays there and the performance falls away very quickly. Then we checked that the shoes were installed correctly, that the bottom spring was in the correct orientation to clear the handbrake lever, and finally we set up the brakes. First of all, using the Girling adjuster at the bottom to set up the foot brakes. Then we hooked up the handbrake, set that to give us 5 or 6 clicks, maximum force on the handbrake. We then took the handbrake off and came back and checked that the hydraulic brake adjustment was still good now that the handbrake had been set up. That's it. This car's ready to go out on the road now. Thank you very much.